Will Chris Brazzell turn out to be the missing piece in the Panthers wide receiver room? We'll break him down right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, and let's continue our Getting to Know the 2026 Draft Class series by discussing the third-round pick in last week's draft, Chris Brazzell, the wide receiver from the University of Tennessee. Going to discuss where he fits in heading into this upcoming season. Going to be joined by Eric Cain, the host of Locked On Vols, to get his perspective on Chris Brazzell's two-year career there up in Knoxville. But let's start off by looking at his background and get some scouts' takes on Brazzell heading into Carolina as a rookie. So he started off his career back in 2022 at Tulane University down in New Orleans. He redshirted that year, but then his first year actually playing on the field in 2023 for the Green Wave. He was a freshman All-American, third-team All-AAC, led the team with 44 receptions, 711 receiving yards, and played in 13 games with 8 starts. He was phenomenal that year. His head coach left, so he decided, let me hit the portal and go to the SEC, where he landed at Tennessee in 2024 and played in all 13 games, including their playoff loss against Ohio State with 9 starts. Only had 29 receptions, 333 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Not a great impact in his first year in the SEC, but last fall in 2025, this is what led him to go night 2 in the third round last week in the draft. He was a 2025 third-team AP All-American, first-team All-SEC, led the team with over 1,000 receiving yards, had 62 receptions, 16.4 yards per reception, by the way, 9 receiving touchdowns, played in 12 games, making 11 starts. And the game that stands out to me, and I brought this up several times here since we've discussed Chris Brazzell as a prospect, but also being now a Carolina Panther, the 6 receptions, 177 yards, 3 touchdowns that he had in week 3 against Georgia. That is the game where Brazzell announced himself to the nation that I am here, I'm that guy, and that began an All-American, first-team All-SEC season. His father, Chris, by the way, was a wide receiver at Blinn Junior College, same junior college that Cam Newton played at after he left Florida and before he went down to Auburn to really begin his legendary collegiate career. His dad also played at Angelo State and was a 6th-round pick back in 1998 by the New York Jets. So he has the NFL pedigree, and his brother, Colin, that's his father. So his father's brother, Chris, his uncle then, Colin, played defensive back at Tennessee. So I wonder if that led to him wanting to go to play for Tennessee after his 2 years there at Tulane. Just looking at his physical profile, 6'4", 198 pounds, ran a 4.37 40-yard dash at the combine that I'm sure had a lot of people thinking about he should go a lot higher than where he went at 83rd overall. Of course, that did not happen, but you got the size, you have the speed, the length, everything you would want out of a vertical threat, which is something Carolina has not had in this offense in a while. That's what you're getting from Chris Brazzell as he's coming to Carolina. His prospect grade over at NFL.com is a 6.36, which will eventually be a plus starter, and that's what Carolina needs. You already have T-Mac as your number one going to play that X. You have Jalen Coker, who I would expect to play in the slot if Brazzell ends up being your starter on the outside there, and to have what you already have in T-Mac as a number one, and we have in Coker, who's been really good for them when he's been available, especially at the end of last season, primarily in that playoff game back in January against the Rams. You have 2 guys you can lean on. You need that vertical element. You need someone who can open up things underneath. And that's what Dave Canales said when he was discussing just how excited he was about Brazzell coming to Carolina, that the intermediate stuff that we've seen that's worked really well with T-Mac, that's worked really well with Jalen Coker, and even Xavier Legette, who can benefit potentially by the Panthers taking Brazzell, that all can open up by having a true downfield threat, which they have not had, at least in the first 2 years of Dave Canales as the head coach and play caller, now handed it off to offensive coordinator Brad Idzik. Quick fun fact, I told y'all this before. If you're a fan of Friday Night Lights, the book and the movie, not the TV show, but the book and the movie, premiered in high school. That was high school. That was brought up and was the main subject of the book by Buzz Bissinger. Their rival high school in that movie and I guess in real life too, is Midland Lee in Midland, Texas. That's actually where Brazzell went to high school. It was called Legacy High School when he was there, and they've changed it back to Midland Lee. It's based off of Robert E. Lee, so I don't know why or what's going on there, but not really a big deal. Just it's a fun fact about him where he went to high school. As far as how do the scouts feel about Chris Brazzell, this is something that came up draft week that I had not even heard of and was not aware of until Adam Schefter put that out there. Many teams say that Chris Brazzell from Tennessee has elite talents that rival Jordan Tyson, the 8th overall pick by the Saints. One general manager even compared him to George Pickens, which great. George Pickens on the field. We saw it last year. Hell of a player, but there are even more questions about his maturity. Don't know where that came from. And I told y'all, I've asked a few people. I'll ask Eric Cain coming up here in a moment about that. So far, I've heard that there's not much to it, and it's kind of a BS report. The only thing I could find was that he was arrested for speeding 60 and a 35 and driving with a suspended license back in August of 2025. The charges were later dismissed, so I don't think there's anything really to it other than he had this one issue that popped up. They dismissed the charges. He's all good. He's just a kid in all likelihood that just is immature at this point in time and does dumb things, but I don't think anything to be all that concerned about as he now comes into Carolina as a professional. Now, Jordan Trgovac, she actually ended up being the lead scout looking at Chris Brazzell. She's an area scout for the Panthers. She spoke to us on Saturday, the final day of the draft back 2 weekends ago, about just Brazzell and what she saw from him. And she talked about what stood out to her when she was scouting Chris Brazzell at Tennessee.
Yeah, so Chris, as you said, the speed is what jumps out to you right away. It's the size, but also it's the combination of the speed, size, and body control that he shows you all over the field. I mean, it's not just that he can take the top off and be a vertical threat. It's that when he's down deep, he's a guy that Bryce can throw up to. He's got that large catch radius. He can go up. He can catch, those balls over the DBs and be able to come down with it and keep his feet on the ground. I think if you watch the Georgia game, which he just absolutely popped off, you see him making some amazing catches down there. And it's just something that completely opens up our offense. And he's been doing that, from his time at Tulane and then to Tennessee.
And that ability is something that has Dave Canales borderline giddy when discussing Chris Brazzell and what he can mean for this offense. Jordan talked more about that ability to make the big play and stay on his feet.
Yeah, so in that Georgia game, he has actually 2 deep ball touchdowns that he scored. He scored 3 touchdowns in the game, which is incredible. I think he had 6 catches for 177 yards and 3 touchdowns, which is, that's exactly what we need and what we want to bring to the Panthers. But in 2 of those touchdowns, he went up, he was contested, he was getting knocked around by DBs, he caught over the DB's head, just those awesome hands that he has, and was able to stay on his feet and make the play. And I think those are the plays that take it from, putting you in position to score to actually scoring, that take you from being, good to great.
And one question I wanted to ask her, and I did ask, was what led to the breakout? You looked at him. He was fantastic. His lone season actually playing on the field at Tulane back in 2023. Then in 2024, didn't do a ton in his first year at Tennessee. Maybe that's just the adjustment period to the SEC. And then he really broke out in 2025. So I asked Jordan, after talking to the Tennessee coaching staff, what was it that really led to Brazzell having the 2025 season that he had?
Yeah, I think anytime you come into the SEC is one of the, hardest conferences to play in, obviously. So with him, I think it was just more time on task. And really just being committed to sitting with the coaches and getting in that extra work and doing all of the extra things that it takes to take the next step. He also last year had some talent playing in front of him. So that always opens things up for someone when, he becomes the guy and then you go out and you show that you can do it. But I think the biggest thing that they told me that was just the extra time that he was putting in to really hone in on his craft and making himself the best player that he could be so that he can come to us.
Love that. The fact that he took ownership of his craft, that he put in more time, was able to have that breakout season. I do disagree with her as far as the talent ahead of him. Back in 2024, Dante Thornton was a fourth-round pick of the Raiders. He had a grand total of 10 receptions for 110 yards last season for Las Vegas. Yeah, the quarterback situation was not great, but I don't think he's a good player. Brew McCoy was a five-star out of high school. If you follow that whole saga, really interesting. He wasn't great at Tennessee. Squirrel White, he was also not great after early returns as a Vol. Felt like he was going to be that next guy. He went to Florida State, I think, had like 6 receptions last season. So the talent in front of him wasn't really that talented, but he did put in the work this past offseason and was able to have a breakout year and, of course, get selected 83rd overall by the Panthers. Dane Brugler of The Athletic had this as far as his takeaway when looking at Brazzell as a prospect, saying Brazzell still has a long way to go before becoming a complete receiver, but he is a long striding athlete and dangerous vertical threat with surprising savvy for his size. He has the talent to become a team's number 2 or a number 3 option, which is exactly what Carolina needs him to be moving forward. Maybe it's not going to happen this season, but certainly in 2027, you hope he can break out and be that number 3 option to Tetairoa McMillan and to Jalen Coker. That is provided that Xavier Legette does not take that next step this upcoming fall in 2026. Eric Cain is the host of Locked On Vols. I'm going to have him come on the show next to break down Chris Brazzell and his career up there in Knoxville with Tennessee. We'll do that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. The NHL playoffs are here, where every shift matters, every moment is intense, and the pressure is at its highest. And just like performance matters on the ice, it matters off the ice too. That's where Rougiette comes in. Rougiette offers treatments designed to help you get ready and stay ready when it matters. Their top option, Rougiette Ready, combines clinically proven ingredients in a simple mint that dissolves under your tongue. It works fast, often in about 15 minutes, and can last up to 36 hours. And they also offer Go Long, designed to help with both performance and control. It's all about confidence and feeling like yourself again. At Rougiette.com/LockedOnNHL and get 15% off your ED treatment. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnNHL for 15% off. Rougiette Performance Medicine for Men. Here with us now from the Locked On Vols podcast is Eric Cain. Check him out over on the socials at _Cainer. That's spelled Cainer. He also covers Tennessee for the preeminent Vol site, VolQuest. I myself am pretty active on there reading about what's going on with Tennessee. No, I'm not a Tennessee fan, but always interested in what's going on up there with the Vols. Eric Cain, what's going on, man?
Hey, Julian, appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely, and excited to talk about Chris Brazzell II, who had a breakout season last fall for Tennessee with Joey Aguilar as their quarterback, and now comes Carolina as their third-round pick. And there's a lot of people who are excited about what he could be for this wide receiver core. I think he brings a vertical element that's been missing here in Carolina. When you look back at his tenure there with the Vols the past 2 seasons, what really stands out to you when watching Chris Brazzell?
Yeah, I mean, you know, his first year at Tennessee in the 2024 season, coming over from Tulane, he didn't really do an awful lot. I think he had 29 receptions, not a whole lot of touchdowns. Had a big catch to help Tennessee beat Alabama, but he really broke out as a senior here in Knoxville. And you know, he's a guy that you know is an outside receiver, but he moves and runs like a slot receiver. Like he's big, but he plays small, if that makes sense. Like he used to play slot in high school and a little bit at Tulane, and you know, then he kind of blew up a little bit. So he's really athletic, really good route runner. He can fly. I mean, he blazes. And the physicality aspect of his game has grown throughout the course of his Tennessee career. But more so than anything last year, I mean, he was just a playmaker, right? I mean, he was so consistent, led the SEC in touchdowns and yards and receiving yards. And he was just the go-to guy. And you knew what you were going to get from him. If not one game, he'd blow up and get double the next game. I mean, he was so consistent for Tennessee's offense. And that was really needed, again, because going into the year, there's a lot of questions about wide receiver. Given what you saw from him and others the year before, you kind of wary a little bit, but he certainly broke out and was great for Tennessee as a senior.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because you bring up the wide receiver core going into last year. Mike Matthews was a 5-star recruit who's going into his sophomore year. Braylon Staley was also pretty highly recruited. So there was hope that those guys could step up and be the guy. And then Brazzell really felt like that game against Georgia announced himself to the national stage. And I'm curious, what do you think led to that breakout? I asked the Panthers area scout, who was the primary on Brazzell when looking at him, and she brought up the fact that he had more talent ahead of him the year prior, which I kind of disagree. I don't know how you felt about the receivers in 2024, but I was not impressed by Dante Thornton, Brew McCoy, or Squirrel White, and the only one of them that got drafted was Thornton. He did nothing last year with the Raiders. What do you think led to him really having this breakout last fall?
Well, first and foremost, I think that, and I'm sure you've heard a lot and probably have a lot of opinions about the Josh Heupel offense and how it translates from college to the NFL. That's a huge talking point, and I know you're probably going to ask me about that. But usually it takes about 2 years to really kind of feel comfortable, settle in. And why I say that is there's a second-year leap usually. Jalen Hyatt, his second year in the system, blew up, Biletnikoff Award winner. There's Hendon Hooker was pretty good his first year when he got here, but second year leap for Hendon Hooker should have been a Heisman finalist a couple years ago, second year in the system. There's countless other examples as well. Chris Brazzell kind of falls in this category, and Dante Thornton as well. Dante Thornton didn't put up Brazzell numbers, but he certainly took a second year leap in the system. So a lot of times it takes about a year to kind of figure out not just what to do, why you're doing it, and the tempo, get all used to that, but also there were some tweaks to the offense and to the route tree this past year. They ran more NFL routes. They cut down on the splits. The trademark of the Josh Heupel offense is wide splits, and trying to put the defensive backs, linebackers, nickel players, or whatever in stress situations. And they cut down on those a little bit. They ran more NFL routes, and that's something that Chris Brazzell talked to us about that at his pro day, and we have to ask that question, and it's almost like he took offense to it. He's like, "No, we're good." Like the feedback I've been getting, they said, "Yeah, they made some tweaks. Yeah, we watched your tape. Yeah, you're good. Like this is a different offense. This is a different route tree than what we saw last year." He didn't name drop, but that they would have saw from Dante Thornton. So I think it's a combination of those two things. It's still the same offense. It took him 2 years to kind of get settled in a little, or it took him a year to get settled in a little bit, but also the tweaks to the route tree was more friendly to his style of play, and I think that just was a perfect combination, and it kind of cultivated with him going off in the first half against Georgia, and that kind of set the tone for his season.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I feel like that Georgia game, man, it's not apples to apples to the one that Hyatt had against Alabama was 5 touchdowns, which is still ridiculous that's even possible for someone to do in that game. But yeah, you brought it up, and I've brought it up here on the show a little bit because I'm looking at Brazzell. I don't see a ton to not like other than questioning with the Josh Heupel offense. Can these receivers translate to the NFL? Like, I'm not a big Dante Thornton fan. I already mentioned I was not a big fan of the receivers they had the year prior. Maybe Nico was the bigger issue, and in getting Joey Aguilar last year probably was helpful, I think, for a guy like Chris Brazzell to break out, just looking at that offense. But you look at Cedric Tillman, really talented. Jalen Hyatt, really talented, but they've gone to the league and they've done nothing. Now, the situations they've been in with the Giants and with the Browns have not been the greatest quarterback situations. I understand that. But is there anything to it, or I'm just making too much out of the whole Heupel offense and the translation to the NFL?
I mean, I think until somebody, I'm not talking like he has to be a Pro Bowler. Well, anybody can be a Pro Bowler nowadays. I'm not talking he's got to be all pro or anything, but I think Brazzell needs to play well. I do. And until a wide receiver from this system, that's coached by Josh Heupel, plays well and then plays well consistently, I think there's always going to be those questions. Do I think it's overblown? I do think it's overblown a little bit. Do I think that there is something there? Yeah. And do I think that Tennessee made some tweaks and not only helped Tennessee's offense out immensely in 2025, but also helped guys like Chris Brazzell out? Yeah, I do. Again, they changed the route tree. They were still getting to the same spots, but they were going about it different ways. They were cutting down the splits. They were utilizing the tight ends more, running multi-tight end sets, which they've done in years past. But they were doing a bunch of different things that they haven't really done from a receiving, from a split, from a technical standpoint. So I do think that helped him as well. But to answer your question, yeah, I mean, until like Chris Brazzell needs to hit well and play well for Tennessee so that Josh Heupel doesn't have to answer those questions. They're going to have to go against that. Now, I would say it hurts you in recruiting. It is not. You mentioned Mike Matthews, Braylon Staley. You go out and got Tristan Keys this past cycle. He's a 5-star. Get talent like Chris Brazzell in the transfer portal. Tennessee's had no issue with Kelsey Pope recruiting at the wide receiver position, but I do think that there is something there until someone can go out there and say, hey, I'm the exception, or there's really nothing to that. Look at me go play. And I think Chris Brazzell can certainly be that guy.
Yeah, and recruiting wise, they know the guys are going to be able to put up numbers in that system. And we know Tennessee is also going to pay what it takes for some of these guys as well. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see if maybe moving forward, if Brazzell doesn't hit, there ever becomes concerns there as far as development. But looking at him even more, like there's things that happen throughout the pre-draft process I don't love. They talk about character issues. The only time I saw it be brought up about Brazzell was the week prior to the draft. Adam Schefter, I've been talking to some people, and they compared Brazzell to George Pickens, which on the field, great. Off the field, maybe less so. So I asked around some people I know up there in Knoxville just about whether there's any concerns. Right? Yeah, and I heard nothing. I heard absolutely nothing other than he's a 21-year-old kid. Apparently, the only thing I could see was that he went 60-35, which I'll cop to probably having done at some point in my life. I don't know about you, Eric. Like, there doesn't seem to be any concerns. I know last year people are probably like, okay, James Pierce Jr., you heard all about it. You actually talked to people in Knoxville. Yeah, there was something to it. Where Brazzell, I've heard nothing.
Yeah, I mean, there was one situation where he got a ticket that you're referencing, failed to appear in court because he didn't know when the date was, because the legal fees, all the papers went to his home in Texas, and then I think his license was caught up in there and it expired. Like, the whole thing was, I mean, you should probably be better aware of your situations, probably, but
sure.
Like he wasn't aware that his license were expired or whatever the case was. So like that was the only hiccup. Again, yeah, the whole character issues. When Schefter said that, I'm like, what are you talking about? I mean, I even called over there. And I mean, I'm there all the time. I even called over there. I'm like, do you see this report? Like, what's going on? They're like, there's nothing to that. Like, this is not a James Spears. Like, he was a good kid, worked really hard. I was kind of surprised when I read that for sure. So that caught me off guard. Again, the only thing that he had was he got stopped one time, suspended license, had to go take care of that. And he was good. Like, I mean, that's the only time he's ever been pulled over or cited or anything. So I was surprised at that. As far as I'm concerned, there's been no character issues whatsoever with Chris Brazzell.
Yeah, I used to live in Nashville and work for the game back then. So I would go up to Knoxville every once in a while, and I talked to two people. I was like, what's the deal here? And they told me basically what you said. Like, there's nothing to it. He's just a kid. Got one situation. So that's good to hear. Lastly, when you look at him coming to the league, what do you think the ceiling is for Chris Brazzell?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think he's certainly a playmaker. I think he's going to thrive playing more games. I think durability sometimes has been a concern. I mean, he stayed healthy his senior year. He missed a lot of camp, which, again, was kind of surprising. He missed a lot of camp and showed up and balled out, so that was really, really good. So I think he needs to continue to, maybe add a little bit, not an awful lot, but don't lose his explosiveness. But I think he's a guy that can certainly be a starter in this league, not from the get-go, but can sit back, learn, kind of get in there, take advantage of his situations. And I don't know. I mean, I made the joke earlier that everybody can make a Pro Bowl, but I mean, if he can play consistently, I think that the numbers will come to him, especially if you get consistent quarterback play there in Carolina. I know everybody watching this show and listening to the show is hoping that's the case, and you turn a corner there. But I certainly think that he can be a Pro Bowl type player. I do. Maybe not from year one as a rookie, but again, he's an explosive guy. His physicality got better. He's a bigger guy that runs like a slot receiver. He's just a mismatch nightmare a little bit, and his ability to go up and high point a football and win those one-on-ones, that's something that Georgia game specifically, that's something that he did really well here at Tennessee, and that was great to see.
Awesome. That's Eric Cain, the host of Locked On Vols. Of course, he also covers the Vols for VolQuest, which, again, guys, is the top Tennessee site. Every Sunday in the fall, I'm always reading Brent Hubb's 10 Things I Think.
There we go.
Great perspective on what's going on up there in Knoxville. And check out his pod, Tennessee Baseball. They're trying to be a regional host this year, first year of Josh Elander, so go check them out. I certainly hope that's the case, Eric. I do not want to see them come to Chapel Hill and be the 2 seed in the Heels regional. So please do make a regional or go to Atlanta and go play in Georgia Tech instead or something like that. But I appreciate your time. We'll take a quick pause, come back here, and we'll talk about where Chris Brazzell could fit into the offense here in 2026. That coming up here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and it's an important reminder that whatever you're carrying right now, you don't have to go through it alone. Life can feel overwhelming sometimes, whether it's stress, uncertainty, anxiety, or just trying to manage everything on your plate. And it's easy to feel like you need to figure it out by yourself. Therapy can be a place to get support, gain perspective, and talk things through with someone who's there to listen and help. BetterHelp connects people with licensed therapists and makes it easier to get matched with someone who fits your needs and goals. BetterHelp has helped millions of people connect with licensed therapists, and the matching process is designed to help you find someone who works for you. And if your first match isn't the right fit, you can switch therapists at any time. Having someone with you, someone to listen and support you, can make a real difference. You don't have to be on this journey alone. Find support and have someone with you in therapy. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's betterhelp.com/lockedon. So how will Chris Brazzell fit into the Panthers roster in 2026? What role will he have? If you look just last year at the initial 53-man roster, the Panthers kept 7 wide receivers. They kept T-Mac, Adam Thielen, Xavier Legette, Jalen Coker, Bryson Tremaine, David Moore, and Jimmy Horn Jr. Of course, Thielen was traded shortly thereafter. Coker, almost immediately after the Thielen trade became official, injured his quad. I want to say that afternoon, after we spoke to Panthers GM Dan Morgan, he injured his quad there on the practice field. I had someone DM me being like, did Coker get hurt? Because I'm hearing that Coker got hurt. And we found out very shortly thereafter, yes, indeed, he did get injured. He was going to miss the first 6 weeks of the season last fall. So the hope is if they keep 7 again, they don't lose someone important like Jalen Coker if that plays out. But really looking at last season, they only utilized 5 guys on game day. Only 5 receivers were active on game days, and all 5 of the guys who were active in that game against the Rams, that being T-Mac, Coker, Legette, Tremaine, and Horn, are all back on the roster. Plus, they bring in David Moore as a veteran who's been around for the last 2 years, dates back to his time in Seattle with Canales and a large portion of this offensive coaching staff. So not a surprise that he is here. So just looking at the role that Brazzell could have, obviously as a vertical threat, that's what you think he's going to be able to do. If Carolina is going to be trying to go deep ball, he's coming on the field to either be a decoy or to actually utilize that. The speed that he has, it would be nice to get him the ball, even if it's going to be, on a screenplay, find a way at 6'4", be able to break some tackles and then get in open space. I would love to see that happen. You want to have him on an end around, be a gadget guy, something like what Jimmy Horn Jr. kind of did a little bit last year. Hell, what XL could do. Why not? Find a way to get the ball into his hands. I'm curious if he'll have any sort of opportunity as a returner. I would think right now that Trevor Etienne is going to get an opportunity as a running back to do that this upcoming season. Maybe we'll see more of Jimmy. Of course, David Moore will get that opportunity. XL will get that opportunity. Will Brazzell be a part of that? We'll find out more in earnest about that probably once training camp rolls around. OTAs, mandatory minicamp. Likely not going to glean too much information from either of those availabilities that happen across the next couple of weeks here, heading into that 6-week summer break that they'll have this year. But looking just at the wide receiver tiers as far as who's secure on the roster, obviously T-Mac and Jalen are going nowhere. Those are your top 2 guys. The next tier is the tier that I'm going to really put Chris Brazzell in. It's the tier where Xavier Legette sits, and Bryson Tremaine, and David Moore, and Jimmy Horn Jr., and John Mechie. Those are the guys you're looking at who are competing for that number 3, 4, and 5 wide receiver role and to be active on game days this upcoming season. Maybe they change it up and have 6 guys active on game day, but just based off what they did last year, likely only going to be 5. And then after that, the tier of guys who are trying to be practice squad guys or Dan Chisena, Jasim Reed, and Anais Smith. So I'm not really looking at those dudes as being necessarily threats to Brazzell and his playing time this upcoming season. Yes, he's going to have to earn his spot on the roster, but as a 3rd-round pick, yeah, he's pretty safely going to be on it. The guys who I think he's competing with are Xavier, Bryson, David, Jimmy, and then John. But really, it's XL, maybe John Mechie that he's competing with to be that wide receiver 3. I don't think the plan is for David Moore to be a big piece of this offense. Same thing with Jimmy Horn. I don't really see that being the case. And we did see with last year's 6th-round pick, Jaden Crumedy, he's not on the roster anymore. I'm not saying that Jimmy's necessarily in a position where he's going to lose his job and not be on Carolina's roster. I'm just failing to see where he fits in and what opportunities are going to be there presented to him when you already have a guy you drafted in first round a year ago in T-Mac. You have Jalen Coker's earned a spot. You obviously just drafted a player in the third round in Brazzell. I don't know where Jimmy Horn fits in all of this. David Moore is a vet. I think he'll be on the roster. What kind of role he play, we'll see. And then Mechie, I don't have high expectations there. And then y'all pretty much know how I feel about Xavier. And let me not forget about Bryson Tremaine. I do think there's value in having Bryson. He's a good run blocker. He made a couple plays in the receiving game. Nothing that really stands out to you other than looking back at last season, but he has value on this roster. So really, as far as that wide receiver 3 role goes, it's XL versus Chris Brazzell. And based off of what Eric said, he doesn't think he's going to come in this year and immediately be that guy, which is part of the reason why I feel like XL, when we talked about this last week, isn't flat out a loser from the draft a week ago or 2 weeks ago because they didn't draft a receiver at 19. Had they done that, that guy comes in and very clearly is going to be your wide receiver 3 or 2. However you want to match it up with T-Mac, with Jalen. T-Mac's your number 1, but maybe he could have taken over mid that 2 and Jalen would have been the 3. It doesn't really matter. Your top 3 guys who are really focused on when looking at this wide receiver room. But because they wait until night 2, round 3 to take a wide receiver, that does allow Xavier, a former first-round pick, who really is kind of a second-round pick, but they traded up one spot one night to get him. That allows him the opportunity to come in and to really be in a spot where he can still win that job and be a contributor on this offense. But the moment he slips up, the moment he does not line up properly, the moment that he drops the ball, can't get 2 feet in bounds when there's no pressure on him, that's when you have to say, all right, enough is enough. Here's a guy we just drafted. Here's a guy who brings an element that we don't have currently on the roster. And this is me talking as a Carolina Panthers coaching staff. Let him get an opportunity because XL's had 2 years of an opportunities. And I think he was probably going to get another opportunity this fall, provided that he does enough during camp and throughout this offseason program going on right now to be in that spot, to be week 1 starter as that wide receiver 3 alongside T-Mac and alongside Jalen Coker. So we'll see how that all plays out. But I do think when looking just at the role that Brazzell's potentially going to play, it's going to be as that vertical threat. It's going to be as that wide receiver 3 or 4 this upcoming season, and really dependent upon how quickly he can transition to the NFL. I do have my concerns as far as Tennessee wide receivers, and I appreciated Eric not necessarily agreeing with me, but not totally wearing, orange-colored glasses and saying, oh, no, that's ridiculous. Like, it's something, it's a thing until a receiver from that offense does something in the NFL. And it's great to hear that they've changed up the splits. It's not as much Mickey Mouse as it had been in the early days of Josh Heupel offensively there at Tennessee. And that maybe benefits a guy like Brazzell, and he comes in and can instantly make an impact for the Panthers. So that certainly is my hope. My expectation is that he will be either that 3 or 4, probably early on. And this is also based off of how things went a couple years ago with Mingo, who cannot play. Mingo started off as that 3, XL was the 4, and eventually we saw that change. We'll see how much resistance, if any, Xavier is going to offer Brazzell as far as Brazzell coming for that spot as wide receiver 3 this upcoming season. So interesting pick. I like the pick. Think he adds an element they have not had. We'll find out in the next couple of years whether he actually is what Carolina thought he was when they took him 83rd overall in the 2026 NFL draft. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours truly, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show for free over on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council, where the mailbag is on hiatus. We'll be back on the 22nd later on this month. So at me, DM me. If you have questions anyways, I can try to get to those just by DM me and answering those in my mentions as well. But in the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole. As always, keep pounding, and we'll be back later on here on Wednesday for a bonus episode, just discussing the biggest questions surrounding Chris Brazzell and potentially the biggest roadblock for him during his rookie season in 2026. All that and more coming up here later today on Wednesday on Locked On Panthers.